It is now.
Okay.
Yes. Right. It didn't. It was supposed to start automatically. It didn't. So okay.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah.
Great.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So it looks like the public is alive and capable. So
Can I ask a question?
is it about the minutes?
No, it has to do with who is here. I can see 6 people, but I can't see anybody beyond that.
You mean on the attendees or the panelists?
On the attendees.
Well, that
You go down to participants in the center of your screen,
Thank you, Rochelle. Okay.
and then click there, and then you'll need to go over to attendees from panelists. They're separated.
Okay. Well, all right. Okay.
okay.
May I make a motion
Yes, please.
that I'll just say it, at the June 2nd, 2020 finance meeting, that I make a motion that we adopt the meeting minutes from May 5th, 2020.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All right. Roll call vote. Rochelle?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that's 4-0 to adopt the minutes. Thank you. All right. And the next item is review the 2021 preliminary budget, consider recommendations to the board of directors. And this is where I wanted just to clarify that when we discuss this budget, let's make sure we stick with the financial aspects of the budget and not get into, say, policy areas where that's where the board should be deciding. For instance, how many police officers, that's really a board decision, not for us to decide. We need to analyze ramifications of the budget, ramifications of maybe different numbers of officers, what types of cars we have. But again, let's keep the discussion around finances and try to steer clear of board policy. Just, we have enough to talk about, and that's really not the reason that this committee is discussing things anyway. So, Katherine, do you want to sort of give an overview of the budget and the documents, and we can answer any questions that the board has, and then let public comment happen, and then we can start our discussion.
Sorry, Katherine, I'm sorry. May I interrupt you for just a second? I so apologize. Bill, could you, because I know we'll get into comments and it'll be really interesting, could you please introduce Chief Schuld if anyone has not met him or is not aware that he's come to Kensington? Excuse me one moment. Someone's mowing their lawn.
Thank you, committee member and members of the committee. If you haven't, and members of the public, if you haven't met Chief Walt Schuld, he's joining us today as a panelist, and we'll be able to respond to questions of the committee regarding financial matters in the police department. But the new chief started several weeks ago and has been doing a great job so far. And I think that the community is should be very glad to have him, and I think he's glad to be here. So I can let him speak for himself about that, but I've heard him say it before, so I'm paraphrasing that anyway. I don't know, Walt, you want to say a couple words?
I think he's on mute.
You're on mute. Unmute. There you go.
There you go. Well, thank you, Bill, and hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here and getting my feet wet in Kensington, and it's my 3rd week, and I look forward to serving the community. I think this is a very nice community, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Great, and thank you for that, Rochelle. That's a good suggestion. All right, Katherine, do you want to just give an overview of what we got?
Sure. So thank you for being here this afternoon. I thought that we could start with just reviewing. So there are a few different documents that I've posted. So if everyone has them on their computer or printed them out, I was going to start with looking at the our budget, our last year's budget, and just do a quick overview of closing last year's budget out, so that we can use those you know, those closeouts for this, and that's what we used for this year's or this coming year's fiscal budget. The only correction I wanted to make would be if you're looking at your actuals through May 31st and projected through June 30th, 2020, the 401 levy tax account, that will be either on budget or over the budget that I have in there. I didn't realize that we do get a small amount in June. We get a 5% in June. So at some point we will know what, you know, closer to the end of June, we'll know what that number is. I think the other things just that we need to just address for this fiscal year are the OPEB contribution. We haven't made that yet. I have it in here that we are going to make it, and we are going to contribute the amount that they have suggested, the 151,470, and that's for the 521T account. I would like to talk about the community center closeout, and I want you guys to, I know everyone knows this already, but I just want to make it clear that the community center has always been presented separately from the rest of the revenue and expenses. So it's always been this capital project that you guys have looked at separately and not included in your, you know, I think it's a separate item in the budget, but it's not actually included on this year's budget or last year's budget. So that's just, it's always been a separate thing that you guys have always analyzed. So I have that community center budget status report. And then I do have a report on cash for, you know, I have an estimate through June 31st, or June 30th of this year. And my cash estimate will include, you know, June's expenditures and the community center closeout. And I'm not sure when the community center closeout, you know, whether it will hit in June or in July, but I have it for hitting in June. Lastly, for the 1920 budget, just the completion of the audit, which we are currently reviewing the audit right now. The auditor got us a draft, and so we're reviewing it. So I guess first of all, if we can look at the actuals through May 31st and projected through June 30th, I can go through by category, or, you know, by account. So the revenue will be just about on target. And our expenses, our police expenses for police salaries and benefits will be probably about 29,000 over budget. And that I believe pretty much has to do with, you know, our 541 account, the Steve Simpkins contract, and then also we were a bit over budget on, yeah, I think that was it for that. But I think we kind of make up for that in other areas. For the police other expenses, they're looking to be about on budget or maybe a little bit under by 15,000. And then if you go through to our parks and rec expenses, they're a little bit under, a few $1,000s under budget. Community center expenses are also a little bit under budget. I think that has to do with the community center not being used right now. So our total parks and rec expenses are looking to be about 30,000 under budget. We may decide to complete the tennis courts. So we'll see if we can get that done before the end of the year. We do have quotes, and I know they've been talking to people to get that done. So then we would come a little bit closer to on budget if we're able to get that done. But I don't believe that we will get the trees done this year. The trees will be rolled into next year's budget, and we did include them in next year's budget. And district salary or district expenses are about on budget, about maybe 20,000 or so under. So, and then lastly, if you go down to the capital outlay, we did make our first payment for the community center loan, and that was for $30,617, and that just went out with this last AP check run, and that's due every year on June 10th. And they do not send an invoice. So that's something that we just always have to remember. And if it's late, then that's not good either. So, we are basically maybe 19,000, projected ahead, give or take, if we're able to get the, and that number doesn't include the additional revenue that we should be getting from the county. So we're probably closer to 40 or 50,000 ahead. However, I know there are a few more expenses before the end of the year. I think the police department has one more expense that they're going to present at the next board meeting for a Verizon contract, and that may be close to 10 or 11,000. And then if we do the tennis courts for 15,000. So we'll just be probably just a little bit ahead at the end of the year. So basically, when we created this this next year's budget for 2021, I used all of these numbers, and we used a 3.5% increase for the tax levy, and so if you guys want to go to the preliminary proposed budget document that for 2021.
Can I ask a question?
Right. Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think we should stop and talk about this before we go to the proposed.
Okay.
I wanted to let Katherine give sort of an overview of everything. Let the public ask any questions and then have the board discussion. Otherwise, it gets fragmented of going back and forth and back and forth. So let's let Katherine give her an overview of everything, see if there's any questions from the public, and then we can discuss all the different items.
So would you like me to start to go through it, or do you just want me to give an I was going to just give an overview.
Give an overview, and then we'll let the public chime in, and then we can have just a board discussion. I mean, a community discussion.
Okay. So the preliminary proposed budget for 2021 basically includes, if we're just looking at revenues, it includes 3.5% increase for the levy tax, account 401. It includes a 2.9% increase for the measure G, which is CPI increase. It includes, we split investment income and I guess district interest income have always been split in the past. I'm not sure the reasoning on that, but they're both the same thing. They're investment income, and it usually comes in one number, every quarter. So that, it's better to underestimate, especially in this economic market right now. I'm not really sure what that's going to look like. So that's underestimated. The police grant, the account 415, we've been researching that and trying, Chief Schuld and I, and Bill, we've all been looking into that. So we wanted to get, you know, a good estimate, but it's hard to actually get that. So we put 100,000 in. Last year we got 155,000. So, you know, it would be great if we get closer to 155,000, but we are not sure right now about that. I'm 100% sure. That's that's why I wanted to note that. As far as the community center revenue, I know Mr. Zanoni, he estimated 35,000 in the past. You know, I don't know, 15,000 might be high for this year because of what's going on in the world right now. I don't know what rentals are going to look like this next year, but we put 15,000 in. So, and then the franchise fees, that increase was based on the number that I got from Bayview. So I spoke with them about that increase. The rest of it, if now we go on to expenditures, the police salaries and benefits, I have a separate spreadsheet that you know, if anybody else needs to see it, but that spreadsheet basically has multiple scenarios for, you know, police force and how many are decided upon. This number was a 9.5 police, and that was something that Bill suggested, as far as, you know, you kind of have to account for frictional vacancies or for, you know, changes in employment. And even if you budget for 10, you're never actually, you know, you never have 10 at a time. You might have people coming and going. So, so that was that number. But I also do have, I have worksheets that give us a scenario for 9, for 8, and I believe that's it. I think just 9 and 8. And then that would also, those numbers would everything would follow from that. So, so all of these numbers came from my other spreadsheet, which takes into account, you know, the all of the different calculations for medical and for health, or for the OPEB trust, and for disability, and for Social Security, and for, they don't actually get Social Security. It should just be Medicare for the police. And as far as the 524 account, I'm not sure why district expenses, admin expenses were ever in this budget category, but they won't be in the future. This is district employees like myself and Bill and Linnell and Alan. So those go down in the administrative expense. So that's why you don't see a number there. And the CalPERS payments, those are exactly what they would be, you know, based on the scenarios in my salaries worksheet. And then the UAL amortization or POB payment, that's an estimate. That's the estimated number for the POB. It would be a little bit different if it's the UAL. And workers' comp, another kind of thing that I changed this year is that I allocated workers' comp and general liability across all three, across the police department and across admin and parks. So any department that has employees in it needs to pay their share of workers' comp. So for police, it was 78%. For admin, it was, or for parks, it was 2%, I believe. And then for admin, it was 20%. So, and then general liability, I also allocated that. That's allocated a little bit differently. I allocated general liability 40% to police, 40% to admin, and 20% to parks and community center. So it was 10% each to each of those departments. And just another note on this preliminary budget that I didn't say in advance, all of the yellow highlighted lines are new accounts that I've added or that I've changed. So it's either a change or an addition. And for the most part, the reasons that I added accounts was just to basically make things more clear for everyone so we know exactly where these expenses are going. For instance, the account, the 672 account for parks and O&M, everything's kind of always been put into that one account. So instead of having, a $90,000 budget line item for one account, I've split it up into, multiple accounts. So it's basically general maintenance, repairs, landscaping, janitorial, rental, utilities, general liability, workers' comp, levies, administration, and then just a small amount in miscellaneous. So, and pretty much for the other account, the other ones also, it's basically just making things a little bit easier for all of us to see so that we know what the expenses are. For instance, also for the administration expenses, a lot was put into 898, which is miscellaneous expense. And so we broke that up into office supplies, 816 office supplies, 817 postage, 818 mileage, 819 dues and subscriptions, 825 board continuing ed conferences, 826 board meetings, 851 workers' comp, and 861 is the LAFCO fee. So I guess from a general just overview, I've went over the police salaries and benefits, and now if we can go into the police expenses, other expenses. I think the only thing to note here, Chief Simpkins had asked for the traffic safety account, so we've added that, the 554. So that's a new budget line item with a $5,000 amount to it. And he also asked for the 593 volunteer programs. Everything else is pretty much, I guess the other thing, the 562 vehicle operation account. And that's something I think that the board needs to discuss, but that has to do with, the vehicles and how many they want to replace and how many need to be replaced, and, whether you replace them all at once and lease them, or you replace one at a time over time. And obviously that expense can get moved into police cars depending on how you decide to deal with that. But that's kind of, I just put that number there for, and that actually could cover two scenarios. That could cover a lease on 5 to 6 cars over, whatever period of time, 5 to 7 years, or it could cover probably one car. And if it was to cover one car purchased outright, we would probably need to increase that a little bit in order to pay for all the other. If you see that the current year, it's about $36,000 for expenses on cars. So we would need to increase that to cover the expenses on the rest of the cars that are breaking down. So so that's that. Everything else, the alarm, the storage, the records, those are all things that those were all in one category. I think it was all in a prisoner booking category before, the 568 account, so I just spread that out. And then the post reimbursed category is so that, we can easily track reimbursements in one account so that we always know, okay, this is how much we've spent for things that are reimbursable, and then they can get them reimbursed easily. And then we have the new line of general liability, which was always just put into general admin instead of spreading it across departments. And just so all of you guys know, general liability went up significantly, I believe about 20,000 this year, and workers' comp went down about that same amount. We did get the maximum number of discounts for, doing all the points for SDRMA. If you do certain things, you get points, and I believe we got about $13,000 off, just from from taking care of all those things. And then they also give us a multi-policy discount, since we have workers' comp and general liability together. They give another discount on that. So that is, general liability is the 40% of what the total is. If we go down to the Parks and Rec, it's all pretty, the salaries is the same. The custodian is not actually a salary, it's just something you guys should note. I was gonna take it out of this category altogether because it's a 602 category, so it is a salary category. And it's an independent contractor that's 1099. But it would be hard to look at history if I change that and put it down into the community center. It would be hard to see that history over time, so I left it there. And then if we go down into the community center, the new counts are the 641 general maintenance, 644 landscaping. I allocated that across parks and rec and community centers, since the community center has its own area that is landscaped. It is separate, so it's a percentage. And then that workers' comp general liability number is 10%, since this is the community center. Rental expenses, the idea would be rental expenses are fairly low because anyone renting should be making up for we should be, making up for the expenses in whatever we're charging them. So ideally, whenever we have a rental, they're paying for their own cleaning or their own, whatever it is, it should be wrapped into the price of what we're charging for the community center. And then miscellaneous is low for that account. And then if we go down to the park general maintenance, the $55,000 number includes the trees this year. And that could be anywhere from, I think the lowest bid was 26,000 for a minimum number of trees that need to be removed for safety reasons, up to, I think, 45,000 if we wanted to remove more for, cosmetic and safety. I think some of the trees, there's a combination. There's, I think, 3 different bids out there, and there's a minimum, and then there's, kind of a maximum. So, so the trees are included in that number. Pretty much repairs, landscaping, janitorial, rental, utilities, and levy administration they all used to be wrapped into the 672 number, which was the 90,000. And the annex, I believe the annex is pretty low, so these numbers might actually be high. The annex expenses, those are just $1,000 I have in 3 different line items. There is some landscaping that does take place around the annex, and I know that there's been clearing and brush clearing and poison ivy clearing or poison oak clearing. Yeah, and then if we go down to tennis courts, this was if we were to have done it this year. I think that's just been, we haven't figured out whether it's going to be in this 2019-2020 budget or if it's going to be in next year's budget. So that may come out before we approve this preliminary budget. And if we go down into district administration, the salaries, that's also included on my salaries worksheet. That currently includes Bill Lindsay's position, my position, Linnell Lewis, the clerk of the board's position, and Alan's position. Computer maintenance is really just the contract with Rubicon, plus I believe an additional about $6,000 for other computer maintenance expenses, which should be enough since we all just got new computers and replaced pretty much everything. So admin, communications, I guess that was I think that was a new title last year, but that includes things like the different board meeting and different communications for, I believe it includes the biannual newsletter that you guys do. Office supplies, postage, mileage, dues and subscriptions. Those all used to be in the miscellaneous expense category of about 26,000, and board continuing ed and conferences. Again, I don't know, that number might be smaller depending on COVID and the situation, and if people are able to have big conferences, or they may still have the conferences but they might be virtual, and maybe the costs would be less. So that was what it was last year, so the $5,000. And board meetings, that number may go down also. That was the rental, that included the rental at Arlington Church, but now it also will include the Zoom subscription and any other expenses. So it may go down a little bit, closer to 1,200 or 1,500. Legal, we are really hoping to keep the legal lower this year. That's a big goal for legal and consulting, to keep those down. We're budgeting $85,000. And for consulting, we also want to keep that number down. Accounting, that would include our annual audit and the monthly contract with Maze right now for oversight of my work and reconciliation, the monthly reconciliations that they're doing. The general liability is the 40%. Workers' comp is the 20%. Elections, this number we took as it's an estimate. Miss Linnell Lewis is actually looking into it a little bit further just to confirm that number is correct. And the LAFCO, that should be correct. That's based on last year's. The police building lease, I projected for a small increase, but we don't have that lease settled yet, so I'm not 100% sure on that. The county expense shouldn't change much. Waste and recycle, I wasn't sure why it was budgeted so much last year, and I did contact Tony Constanturos, and he said that it was for possible consultants to do a rate study. So I don't know if that number was too high, but for this year we're budgeting 5,000. And if the board needs to change that, we need to look at that possibly, if a rate study is needed and if it actually is that much. And miscellaneous expenses, we're just, putting in a buffer for miscellaneous expenses that may come up throughout the year of 10,000. So I think office furniture and equipment, we put in an amount of 5,000, thinking that we may need to put some, we may need to buy some different office furniture for the community center. I'm not sure. That may be high. And computer equipment is just a buffer in case something breaks or if we have a new employee come or, and then the community center loan repayment that will last for 10 years. So, so I believe if you guys wanted to look, there was one more sheet. It's the budget summary sheet. You can see this year we're really trying to we're splitting the budgets up by department as far as income and expenses. And in previous years, all the income was put into, for the most part, most of the income was put into police. And so the other two department or other three areas were in deficits. So, we kind of really want to hold the departments accountable to their budgets and to staying within budget. So it's good to have each department have their own balanced budget. So if you look at like the last year, the 1920 budget, the Parks and Rec income is 39,000, but the expense is 126. The income for district administration is 51,000 and the expense is 653,000. So it's really just an allocation of the general tax levy, so that the other two departments have positive income, or net zero is the goal. So that's the budget in a nutshell.
Okay. Let's let the public have any comments or questions, and then we can have as a board just a complete discussion. So public, someone raises their hand and it looks like, Lynn, you're on?
Hi. So I'm a little perplexed by the income allocations. We've always been a police protection district, and the other services were added on after the fact and were never meant to siphon money off from the general fund. And in fact, when the special taxes were adopted going back to just post Prop 13, those special taxes were meant to be in addition to the general fund money that was designated almost solely for police protection. And then in 1981, garbage was added, and then subsequent to that, we purchased 8 acres of the park. The community center was owned previously, but it really was never identified as a cost center. So this is a huge departure from that model. Secondly, I did a Public Records Act request and asked for some documents pertaining to the budget, and found that in looking over some of the detail, it appears that people who were hired to be temporary people between the district administrator leaving and Katherine starting, those people's costs were allocated to accounting, and really to get an accurate reflection, they probably should be considered in the context of district administrative salaries. So maybe some sort of a subset of account 808. And then I also saw that Sloan Sakai, Bill Zanoni had some invoices that were put into the accounting account. And I believe that going way back, consultants of this sort were assigned to consulting. And then lastly, with respect to the legal expenses, these were at almost $140,000 as of March 25th. And so I believe that the budget for the current fiscal year allowed only $80,000 and only for Ann Danforth. And so I'm wondering how that amount is going to be held at $80,000 in the upcoming fiscal year. So thank you.
All right, I'll let, wait a second. Okay, I'll let Katherine, well, when we get into the whole budget, you can explain some of the accounts, but I should make it clear, we're a community services district. We once were a police protection district, but we became a community services district many years ago. So just to clarify that.
I think, and from where I'm coming from, you know, administration is working directly with the police department. Everyone's working together. So if you're thinking of it from like a perspective of, you know, having these separate departments, the only reason that you want your budget to be positive for each department is so that you're holding your department accountable, like it means something. So if every single year your administration is, you know, $600,000 negative, then, you know, it doesn't mean anything to administration. It's like, okay, well, my budget is 600,000 and that's for my expenses. My income for my department is only 70,000. So I'm in the hole every single year for that department. So then you have to look at actually making big changes, you know, eliminating the department maybe, I don't know. But if you're really trying to, you know, hold a department accountable to their budget, you know, it should be net zero or a little bit positive. So, you know, I think there's a few different things, you know, you're looking at, you know, what each department is doing. And I think that all the departments are supporting each other. So from a perspective of, am I working for the police department or is Alan working for the police department, is, you know, we're all working together to support the entire district. So I think that that has to be the main goal, but just for holding people accountable to their individual department budgets. And that's the reason for this. I've never seen a budget where departments are negative. So that's just, you know, and maybe that just, it just kind of morphed over time and that was what was being done. But so, I mean, this is just a proposal. If this is how, if you guys want it to be by department and negative each year, then that's, you know, just your choice. But to kind of hold each department accountable to their budget, it's good to allocate the amount of money that that department needs to function. And then the next question I think was about Bill Zanoni's fee, and we can look into that. I was looking into it. I think the idea is, you know, things of this nature, budget preparation and different accounting things. I guess I wasn't sure if that was accounting or consulting, so it can be moved. I just hadn't ever moved it yet, and I think I need to have the transmittals resent out once I do that, if we decide to change the accounts for Sloan Sakai. As far as keeping legal fees down and consultant fees down, I think the only reason that we put the 30,000 in consulting, I think that was for two things. For if we decide to do some kind of a study for, I believe for the rate study for the waste and recycle, we can move some of that, but it's also for if, for Bill Lindsay as interim, so if there is ever another recruitment for general manager, then that would be that number. It would probably be lower, hopefully. And then as far as for legal, I think everybody knows that there has been a lot of legal expenses associated with the district over the last few years. So we're really hoping that can stay low. And the 85,000 is just really for Ann's time and Danforth's time as general counsel. I hope I answered all the questions.
Okay, well, we'll see.
Okay.
Someone else has no. Wait a second. Dave, you're on.
Thanks, Chris. This is a question with regard to police overtime. And I note that you're budgeting 60,000, which seems to be a little optimistic, given the amount from last year and the amount you project even for the month from May to June is over 9,000. And I'm assuming that I think we have 8 officers now. So, and maybe Chief Schuld could speak to this, but it does seem to be a little optimistic that it's going to be that low.
I talked with Katherine about this. If we're budgeted for 10 officers and the actuals is 9, or I guess budgeted for 9.5, but we authorized 10, then my plan is to do some aggressive recruiting to get that staff level up and keep it up, and therefore put the overtime down. There's also some other things we can do here in the department that haven't been done in the past to reduce overtime. So I'm looking at that. So I'm optimistic that $60,000 will be enough, unless there's more emergencies like we've had these last few weeks or the COVID. Then of course that may go up. And if we do not meet our recruiting goals and that overtime goes over that, you will still have salary savings to cover that overtime that we use. So either way, I think we didn't want to over budget, but we didn't want to under budget. But I think between the two, we'll be fine for next year.
And just to chime in on that, just so that you know, David, for 8 officers, overtime is at about 131,000. For 9 officers, it goes down to about 80,000. For 10 officers, we have it at 40. So for 9.5, we have it at 60. So just to reiterate, what Chief Schuld is saying, we would just see it decline as we have more officers. So.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Carl, welcome aboard. Sorry. Wait, let me get you going here. Can you unmute yourself? There you go. Okay, Carl's here. All right. No more questions from the audience, public? Okay, so let's start with, all right. I'm sorry, see, Lynn, you raised your hand, but you already had a chance to speak. So let's go to the committee and start off with questions. I think Jimmy had some questions. I'll let you go.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to go through first the actuarial study through May 31st, that one. and then have everybody comment on that and then go to the next one. So if that's okay with you, just so we're not jumping back and forth between these. So in other words,
You wanted to go through the actuals?
yeah, the one that yes, the actuals.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And I have very few comments, but I just, so it should go relatively quickly. My comments on the actuarial through May 31. First is on line number 415, and I apologize if Katherine spoke about some of these things and I missed her comments, but I'm looking at the fact that we are estimating that we will finish this year taking in $100,000, which, as I think we all know, is well below what we have managed to get over the last couple of years. It's been closer to 150. So I'm just curious as to why we have settled in at 100.
I think we just don't want to be overly optimistic with this climate. We don't actually know, and Chief Schuld and I have been trying to research this. So that's the COPS grant from the state of California, and I believe it's estimated. You know, it's based on vehicle licensing fees, so it should be closer to the 155,000. But there's not a way of telling that we know. So.
Okay.
Just you know, we're just trying to be conservative.
Okay. No,
if it comes in at closer to 155, then that's going to be wonderful.
I just wanted to, I expected you to say that, and I just wanted to hear it. The only other really comment I have on this is if we go to the last page, I'm looking at it page by page. And the last page is the one that's includes the 900 category. Is everybody there?
Yep.
Okay. And my question is, we have in the first line item, what has been spent between July and May. We have a series of numbers in that 900 category. And why is it that this series of numbers isn't transferred over to the second column from the right?
I think that was just an oversight on my part. I'm sorry. I will do that. And I will correct this.
Katherine, it's okay. I just want to point out, so you agree that it should have been transferred over.
Yes.
And if it was transferred over, the sum of that transfer would have been, according to what I see above here, it would have been $87,000. So I just want to point out that what we appear to be looking at here, now again, there are so many variables here, and we've talked about this. We understand, like the 100,000 that I just talked about could go up.
Well, and the 5% too for the levy tax, that will go up too.
No, we understand that this is not the final. We get that. But this does add a rather significant sum to how much money we might end up with. Because if you go down to the bottom there, you will see that where it says operating shortfall surplus, in that second to right, from the right column, it shows that we were expecting to get about a $19,000 surplus out of this year's budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we now have to add 87, but we might get some back in the on these other items. So we don't know, but I just want to point out that we are my only point I want to make here is that we are very close to break even. Could even maybe even come in with a negative. We don't know.
Well, the 87 was what was spent in 1920, right?
No, it was spent between July of 19,
right,
and May of 20. So it needs to be in this year's budget. Okay. So we have. So if we were just to move those over, instead of showing a $19,000 surplus, we would actually be showing something like a $70,000 negative. That's all. Look, I don't want to make a big deal out of this because I understand that this still is going to change when we finalize it. But I do want to point out that we may not be looking at a surplus. That's all I want to say. So I'm finished with any comments I have on that. All right.
And I will update the spreadsheet. And
Okay. No
post it.
problem. No problem. No problem.
You're correct. It's negative 68,000.
Right. Okay. I understand. This is still somewhat preliminary. I get it. I just don't want anybody leaving here thinking that we could very easily be finishing the year positive, because the comments that were made prior to my mentioning an $87,000 negative that we haven't added in would indicate that we shouldn't be too optimistic that we're going to be up because we're going to be getting some of these other benefits. So that's all. I just want to point out that we could very well be coming in with a break even and maybe even a negative budget, but that's all. That's all I want to say. And I'm ready now to go to the next packet, which is the preliminary proposed budget. And
Jim?
you want to start with the public?
Well, no, the public already have their comments, but just if there are any more committee members that want to discuss this report.
Sorry.
I do have a question. The 100,000 estimate, when will we know exactly how much we got for the?
Are you talking about the COPS grant?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got my feelers out to several chiefs, and so far they're a little perplexed too. It should have come out by now, so that's why I think we're being conservative with it.
This month, though, you think we'll hear?
I'm hoping we hear soon, but we should have heard a couple months ago. That's the problem. So I'm gonna make a few more phone calls again and see if anybody can help us out.
We have never known ahead of time. There's always been a question. And at times we've been surprised about what we received and what we did not receive.
And I did speak to, or I emailed with Debbie Russell about it, and she said that sometimes we can get money straggling in, you know, because this is an accrual, but she said you can get money straggling in through like August and September for the last fiscal year. So that's another thing that I have to kind of look into.
All right. No one else has questions on this? Okay, Jim, keep on going.
Now we're okay. Now we're going over to the preliminary proposed budget, correct?
Sure, that's a good idea.
All right. Okay. Well, of course, the same comment comes up when we talk about revenue, and that is, and by the way, I certainly agree that I think that the levy tax is going to be greater than is shown here. Historically, in the last couple of years, it's been much more than a 3.5% increase. So that's line item 401. So I do think we'll probably see an increase there in the 2021 budget. And I'm sure that Katherine probably would agree with that. And likewise, we could very well receive more grants under the 415, just as we've just been talking about. So these numbers could actually come in somewhat better. That's all I want to say on that one. Now we'll move on to the expenditure side. I've heard from Chris that he doesn't want to get into a breakdown of the salaries, so I won't.
No, Jim,
Yes.
it's not that I don't want to get into a breakdown of salaries. It's more I don't want to get into, should we have 8 officers, 9, 10, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, no. And so I don't, Chris, I don't want to get into that. I'm trying to accommodate you on this, okay? All I wanted to do was just to point out that this number, see, it took me a while to figure all this stuff out because I didn't get the detail until a day or so ago when Katherine sent it to me as to how we came to this. And then I saw that because we were increasing our staff from 8 to 9.5. So I just want to point out that is a big increase. And I want to point out that increase is significantly, as you can see, above the actuals that we had if you go over to the first two numbers under fiscal year ending 17-18 and 18-19, it's significantly above those years. It is actually not significantly above this year, even though if you look at that line item, you see that we're at 995, because the 995 doesn't include the money that we paid for our interim police chief. So I just want to point out that our costs have gone up significantly for salaries over where they were on, these are actuarial numbers in 17-18 and 17-19, where they actually came in at call it 750 and 725. And now we are moving up into the almost $1.1 million category. Just want to point that out. That's all I want to say about it. I think that if in fact we were to staff up to that level, I would have to hope that our overtime costs would not come in at 60,000. I'm sure that Carl and I have been around on this thing for a long time. Remember that in the days of 3 or so years ago, we used to generally have overtime costs in the $30,000 to $40,000 category when we were fully staffed with 10 officers. So I just want to point out, I think that 60 should be considered high if we're staffing up to 9.5 officers. That's all.
Walt, could you maybe explain why if we had full staffing, we would need 60,000 in overtime still?
Because of things that come up like the last couple of weeks, COVID, I've had to put an extra officer on graveyard because we got these roving bands of vehicles coming to go through El Cerrito, Albany, and then they tried to come up here, but our officers put on their lights at the intersection down in Calusa and stopped them from coming into our city. I don't want one officer on something like that because it's dangerous. So that's overtime. But when you have 10 officers, you can move officers around without creating overtime. Like for part of this graveyard double shift that I'm having, I'm taking the traffic officer and putting them on graveyard, which is not causing us overtime. But anytime we have somebody sick when we're down staff, that's overtime unless we can somehow rearrange the schedule at a last minute notice. When there's vacation, it's very difficult to staff a 24/7 operation with a minimum staffing and not incur a lot of overtime. But once we get up to that overtime, we have more flexibility to flex time, and the POA has been very receptive to flexing this overtime. In fact, I got volunteers to come in to save overtime on graveyard, but sometimes you just can't do it. And then when you have somebody on overtime, that's a 12-hour shift. Normally in another department, they just hold over for 4 hours, and it's a 4-hour, 4 or 8 hour or 10-hour, but ours is sometimes 12 hours. So there's a lot of factors that go into why overtime is up when your staffing level is down. And then also, then you put fatigue on officers when you have a couple of officers that work a lot of overtime and don't get the rest, and then they call in sick, and it's a cascading effect.
But I guess the question is, if we do fully staff up and we're spending 1.1 million on salaries, do we still need a lot of overtime budgeted? I guess that's the question.
That's why we reduced the overtime so much. And the problem is getting up to that critical staffing level, because nowadays officers are looking at pay in other departments, and so retention level is going to be a little bit more difficult, but I have some other ideas on that. We have 2 officers that are thinking of leaving to go to BART, so that's why I'm ramping up this recruiting. We got 1 officer that we think we're going to hire. He hasn't passed all his his requirements yet, but so there's, as soon as we hire one, then we have 16 weeks of training that we have to do for that officer. So to keep that a staffing level up to 10 is very difficult in a small department. Sometimes even in my last department, I would ask the city manager to let me hire 2 over, because I knew in 3 months I would be down to the minimum staffing.
Right.
So,
And I think if you add, you add the pandemic to it also, it's hard to budget less for that line item, because, with this pandemic, it's not going to just end in 2 months from now. It could be the whole year that we're dealing with this. And then if officers get sick, or if, you can't hire because people are sick, that all kind of comes into effect. So I think that's why we were a little bit higher on that overtime number. Because initially I would have liked it to be closer to the $40,000 number, but we did raise it a little bit just because of all that's going on in the world right now. And our staffing levels are, aren't, as you're saying, there, we could be losing some police, and then we're still going to have to gain more. So even getting up to that 9.5 might be optimistic.
All right. Good, Jim, sorry.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's see. I'd like to go down to 528. Did I get that right line? No, 527. CalPERS district portion. When I went to the pages that are contained in the reports that we get from CalPERS, I don't know, am I coming up online here? Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I can see you holding a piece of paper. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, this is, okay, sorry about that. This is from CalPERS. This is the report that they put out annually.
This is what we had last meeting.
Yeah, okay, but what I want to point out, that in that report, and on the page that I'm showing you that you'll never be able to read, okay, it says that for the year 20 to 21, the required contribution will be, and it tells you how much. Now, the one that I'm looking at here is the required contribution for our, there's a term for these officers that joined the force before 2013. For those people that, we now break it into 2 categories. We break it into those officers and the officers that were hired after.
So it's classic and PEPRA.
Thank you. Classic is the word I was looking for. Classic
Correct,
is
yes.
the word.
So the PEPRA are very much cheaper. The classic
Correct.
is going to be a more expensive
Correct.
plan.
So my point here is this. If you look at this report, which says that these are required contributions, you will see that the required contribution for the classic is $287,000. If you now go over here, and I'm pulling it up, and you look at what the required contribution is for the, hang on just a second, for the, you know what? You know what, I may, hang on just a minute here. You know what, I'm going to have to send this to Bill Lindsay, because I don't want to take everybody's time here to go through this. I will just send him how I come up with a somewhat different number. Is that okay? Is that okay with you? Rather than spend time on it.
That works for me.
Yeah, that's fine.
And Bill, Jim, just so that you know, so the 264,000 for the 529 account,
Mhm.
that that would be taken out of that 405,000 number. So I know that that would be higher if we don't do the POB. This number is the POB number. If we do if we stick with the UAL through CalPERS, it'll be the 287 plus the PEPRA, which is a much smaller number. I think it's like 8,000 or something. So basically that 405 number is split up now into the 527 and the 529, just so that you understand that.
Okay. And I think I got that. I still think I will have to send something to Bill Lindsay on the 528. So we'll just handle it that way. All right.
That's fine. I'll take a look at it.
All right. I now understand 562. I did not understand this vehicle operations, but that actually included the purchase of vehicles. Am I correct?
That includes either a purchase of one vehicle or
Right.
the purchase of a lease of a
Right.
fleet of vehicles. So it just depends on what's decided. So
Right. So, okay, so that explains that one. I think I've gotten explanations on a lot of these things, so I'm trying to check off the ones that I still would like to have information on. And police cars. Okay, so I'm really over in the 900 category, which I believe is the last page. Okay. Here's probably my biggest concern. We all know that we have some real issues confronting us with respect to the public safety building. And that those issues will, in all likelihood, be addressed during this fiscal year that we are now looking at, the 2021 fiscal year. Yet, unless I'm missing something here, I do not see any money being set aside to potentially deal with those issues. Did I miss something?
Catherine, Jim, I'm assuming you're referring mainly to the relocation, the temporary relocation of the police department, but also of the administrative staff.
Well, what I'm really thinking about, Chris, is I have to believe that the solution that will likely be found to solve the problems of police and fire is that we are going to have to take the existing, what do we call that building that's next to our
The public safety building?
No, that's next to our community center.
Oh, the annex.
Annex. I think we're going to have to do some work to fix up that annex. I think that's just the only solution to solve the problems between the two districts. And in order to do that, that's going to cost some money. And I don't know that the fire district is going to throw anything into that side of the equation, but yet, who knows? We're a long way from that. But what concerns me is that assuming that that might be the logical solution, it seems to me that we ought to be kind of preparing for that kind of a solution and maybe setting aside something like, let's just throw out a number here, $100,000 to go in, look at it, do some studies, maybe even start doing some work, because as you know, that building needs to be significantly upgraded before it can even be used. So I'm just wondering why we haven't planned for that, given that it's likely to come up this year.
I think as far as from what Bill and I have spoke about just recently, you know, we don't know as far as for this next fiscal year, we don't see us moving this next fiscal year. It most likely would be the following year, but I can let Bill speak to that a little bit more. He's been talking to them more, but.
Yeah, and just jumping in, first of all, Committee Member Watt, I think that you raised a good point about what might need to be done for planning any facility. And, you know, my recommendation for this meeting today is that that concern or question be communicated to the board, so that the board consider that also as part of the budget. It is hard to know exactly what the timing is, but I do think that it's very possible, even very likely, that there'll be some architectural work that's required, at least architectural work, on whatever structure, whether it's the existing police or existing public safety building or the annex or some other option. So I think, again, I think it's a good point, and one that perhaps should be communicated to the board if that's the willingness of the committee today.
Rochelle, did you want to say something? Unmute yourself there. There you go. I don't hear anything.
I am.
Oh.
Hi.
No, we can't hear. You're not coming through. Your audio is not coming through. Wait a second, Carl. Let me see if I can get Rochelle going. I'm gonna mute you and unmute you. Let's try this. How about now? Can I hear you?
Can you hear me?
No, Rochelle, we can't hear you.
What?
Well, Rochelle, let Carl go and see first. So that you go. Go ahead, Carl. Unmute yourself, Carl. Can you do that? There you go. Huh?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Is it my turn?
Well, go ahead.
Okay. And I will make it short because I'm not prepared to fix dinner for all of you. So I will try to be as short as I can be. What I was missing in all of this was, number one, a narrative. Because if we would have had a narrative, we wouldn't have to talk about 562. I had a question on 562. We wouldn't have to talk about the safety building. There should have been something in there that says, if we don't buy a new car, we're going to spend it. This is not including the relocation of the safety building. The other thing is, the last balance sheet I have is from the meeting of March the 10th, and that's a balance sheet as to ending January 31st. I think there should have been a balance sheet in there. We need to have an understanding where we are on these issues. Also, I did not have the salaries for our officers. Someone was nice enough to send them to me. So having said that, I want to go to the preliminary proposed budget. I actually feel very positive about our cash flow because our cash flow has been very positive for a number of years, probably a decade and a half. But the increase on 4.1 is actually 4.8% to the expected actual revenues for the year. So I don't know if we can do 4.8. That might be a big push for us. The other thing that I have on the income side that I have a question on is 456. Why did the interest suddenly go to $10,000? I don't understand that. I mean, we don't have any money, and we budgeted $10,000 for interest.
The interest is allocated between the two different, so there's investment, so account 416 and account 456 are both interests. They come in one payment, and it's about 20,000 a year that that's what we have made in the past. So it's just the way that it's allocated here. Half and half. Before it was all allocated for some reason to investment income police. It's pretty much all the same. So I don't know why it was allocated like that. But to me it's not anything different. It's interest income. So we could just make one line interest income and not have both of those.
It's $5,000 difference. out of 20,000, it's 25%. I think you ought to write yourself a note and look at that again. Okay?
Okay, so the actual 416 for 1819 was 28,000 for account 416,
Right.
and then it was 3924 for 456. So if you add those two together, it's close to 30,000. So 20,000 as a budget is 10,000 under. So it's still underestimating. So I mean, I can definitely look at that further, but I'm just letting you know where I got that number from.
I disagree with you, but that's okay. I'm asking that you take another look at it. I would then go to, we already sort of beat overtime to death. But what I would like to tell both you and our new interim chief is that during times of normal operation, we have had overtime hours. It has nothing to do with the present situation. Part of it is that we've been understaffed. And the thing that concerns me most of all is that we permit officers to work unbelievably long hours. I know of one officer who worked 22 hours. He charged for 23, but he worked 22. We should not permit that. We cannot give an officer a weapon and an automobile and send them out there for 22 hours. So anyway, I just think the overtime needs to be looked at. The next question I have, and I don't know if you answered that or that I understood that well, is 530. 530 is workers' comp. Why did that change so dramatically?
So I allocated it across the 3 different departments.
Okay.
So each department that has employees has an allocation for workers' comp. So since police is about 78% of the salaries number for the whole department, there's, okay.
I'm satisfied with that answer.
Okay.
The next question I have is 588. I don't understand the dramatic change in that one. We go from $5,200 to $27,500.
So that one, I took the expense from communications, which is for AT&T, for the phone expense for the police lines. Those lines are really expensive. They're like $1,500 a month. And it has to do with our contract with CalNet. So I put that into telephone rather than it being in the communication line. So in the past, it's been under 564. And that's just because it's going to the actual telephone company versus going to a contract for communications.
See, a narrative would have also taken care of that. I wouldn't have to take everyone's time. So I want to go to my favorite subject, which is legal fees. Now, every year we have said we are trying to keep the legal fees down. And, you know, our budget for legal fees has been in excess of $250,000 every year. I bet you in the last 12, 15, 20 years, we have not been under 200,000. And unless our new general manager and unless our new police chief makes a real effort, the board too, makes a real effort, that is not enough of a budget. We have just not been able to exceed that. I'm looking at today's numbers and we are in excess of $250,000 again. And then a couple of years ago, we decided to sort of make it look a little bit better. We put it on 2 different line items, which really did nothing except just make us feel a little bit better. So I don't think there's enough legal fee budget in there.
Well,
the next question I have is on 642. I don't understand why that change is so dramatic. The amount is not large, but the percentage is fairly substantial.
642 just changed because we allocated things differently. So I believe that some of the utilities were put into the 672 account that's at 90,000. So that just got reallocated to be under utilities.
And as I
So just-
recall, Catherine, also there was another issue, I think, of the water being really under budgeted during the prior year, and this reflects more accurately the water usage. Is that the right line item, or is that a different one?
Water usage is under 656 utility.
650, okay, thank you.
That's a new account now.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Then my next item is 835, which is consultants. I would like to have our new general manager talk about that for a minute, as to what we are going to do in terms of using consultants. We had a previous general manager who liked to work with consultants, but he also developed what looks like a good administration staff. So from my way of looking at it, that ought to take care of some of the consultants. And of course, that's the reason why the consultant fee should have maybe gone down even more than what it did.
Yeah, Committee Member Kruger, I agree with you. What the intent here is to just sort of eliminate the operational use of consultants. Catherine talked about that a little bit earlier.
I thought we were on a first name basis now.
If you'd like me to call you Carl, I will. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. But but the idea is a lot of consultants were being used just for operational kinds of things, which and I agree that we have a good professional district staff now that the prior general manager brought on. I think we can cut down the use of that sort of general operation use of consultants, which is an expensive way to get the business done. And what I would say in terms of the consulting line item, if the board has a specific project that they know that they want to try to do that will involve hiring a consultant, and I think the solid waste rate review is a good example of that, then we should budget for it. But if it's just if it's just general use of consultants, then I think as a practical matter, it should be more tightly cost controlled.
Okay. What is under 840 accounting? What do we go to the outside for now?
That's just for the annual audit.
Okay.
And for the contract that we currently have with Maze for, it's about $1,500 a month for oversight of myself, and they do account reconciliations for us and small projects ad hoc like the CalPERS reconciliation. So it's just me. So in order for me to have oversight of accounting, I have to have, someone else overseeing me, or I wouldn't be comfortable doing this job. So that's what their purpose is. If I had accounting staff, then it might be a different, it might be a different structure when it comes to that, because then I'd be overseeing someone. But since I'm not, that's why.
I remember now that you sold that to the board and they bought it. And okay. My final comment then is, I've looked at budgets for a long time, and this is pretty thin. If we just make a couple of mistakes along the line, we are going to have a negative budget. And as Jim said, we do not have the safety building issues accounted for, even if I don't think we're going to move within a year, but there are going to be expenses that are going to be related to the safety building that we have not accounted for. And I don't feel very optimistic. I think that our problem is on the expenditure side. It's not on the revenue side. So that's my final comment. Thank you very much.
Michelle, can you make noise?
Can you hear me?
No, we can, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Bill and Catherine. This is really wonderful. I really like the move towards shifting expenses into our 3 areas of responsibility. It makes much more sense, even if it does take, maybe we do need an assumptions or or changes page in our narrative when we move to the next form that will explain to folks so that they understand. I think just a one-time, since it's a transition from having workers' compensation be all in one basket. And now it's in these different baskets. So I look forward, I guess we're gonna move, when it comes before the board or it's in final form, we'll move more towards the form that we had last year, which does include some narrative portions, which I know other folks have to work on. But this is a fantastic start and I'm really, really happy. I want to note that I think 427, your community center revenue is spot on. I already know that KCC has canceled now all their summer camps due to health concerns. So there will be no revenue or use of the building for use of the park for summer camp this year, unfortunately. As far as the annex and public safety building go, I agree both with Carl and Jim. There isn't anything here, and immediately I want to start talking about the annex. But we're just in the position that I think this year is really going to be a critical mid-year budget review because there's so much that we don't know yet. And President Deppe and myself have chatted about what we don't know and what we wish we could figure out before this budget goes to bed. But I think that we won't even have all the answers there. So we could talk about what numbers you would like to see, and there will be some presentation of considerations for temporary housing and the annex and things that will appear at board meetings probably late in June. But having a full picture is not probably going to be possible before the end of summer, just because we don't know where we're going to, what's happening in terms of county regulation and what we can accomplish. And then will come, of course, unfortunately, figuring out how our budget is possibly impacted in terms of property tax revenue. Hopefully it's very consistent and nothing happens, but it's hard to know. So that I think will be very necessary. To address the accounting question, our accountant increased their fees to $150 an hour this year without much warning. So there was the board had to take action, and we've always needed to have replication of duty in some manner, at least that someone else knows what our staff is doing, so that in the unfortunate occurrence that a staff member left abruptly, that we could continue on without interruption. And that's what Maze provides us in a way that perhaps a single accountant could not, and especially one who had moved so far beyond what I believe that this committee and the board would want to compensate at a level we wouldn't want to compensate. So that is why accounting will shift. You'll see the real cost of accounting this year is close to $100,000 already because of that dramatic increase. We're, I think, at 99,000 at the end of May. So that was a big change. And so I think the hiring of Maze was a proactive and necessary step. We have to remember, I think, that we are just this month, hitting our third year with a real general manager, independent general manager. And we've made important steps towards professionalism, towards fiscal accountability and transparency. And I think we're almost getting there. So it's really great. And I look forward to working with Bill and Walt and Katherine and moving us further along this road, because it'll be really exciting, and making sure that that our expenses really add to the district, which I think, the body cameras and vehicle maintenance or upgrading and even new facilities will do. So, so thank you. That's about all I have.
I think it would be good, speaking of the annex, maybe Bill, you could work with Rochelle and I, because we've looked at this a bit, about even just coming up with a potential or proposed amount to add to the budget for the next board meeting. And then the board can discuss if it makes sense to put it in there.
Yeah, that sounds good. As you might guess, I probably need a little bit more background on this to put a number in. So we can work on that.
Yeah, there's still a lot of unknowns, but at least we could propose something and the board can decide if they want to adopt it. But
yeah,
it'd be good to at least have something to consider. So you and I, Rochelle, can work on that.
Okay.
If Rochelle, is that okay? Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right.
Chris?
Yes, Jim.
It's okay. I got cut off right at the most important point that I wanted to make. So if
Of
I could
course.
just complete what I wanted to say. I had asked, and I know this was only 24, 36 hours ago. I had asked if we could get some additional information prior to this meeting, and the information that is missing, and I think is critically important. And frankly, until I see that, I can't vote to approve this thing, is this. We have an unfunded reserve account. And the last time we saw the number on that unfunded reserve account was back in December from Bill Zanoni. And the amount of money in that unfunded reserve account was approximately $1,050,000. Now I have made this is money that we have available to spend, but I have made the case, and I think that Bill Lindsay and others would certainly acknowledge that this is the only way to go, that we cannot touch all of that $1,050,000 or whatever it might be today, because we need to use that for our day-to-day needs, because we only get a significant portion of the money that we get from the county in December. So we go down, as Bill Zanoni would tell us, we come into December oftentimes working our available cash down to maybe only $200,000. So my point is, we have about, at last call, we had a little over $1 million. We need to maintain a reserve of at least $850,000. That only leaves us with $150,000 roughly in cash. When I look at how it is that we are likely to finish this year, it looks like we will finish at break even. Therefore, we will put no additional money into that fund. Yet here we are talking about the fact that probably within the next year or two, and the sooner the better, given the fact that this building doesn't meet earthquake standards, we need to do something about fixing the public safety building. And that is going to end up costing us a lot of money, yet we have very little available money. And so until I see that we have sufficient money in that reserve account, and how much money we expect to have come the end of this fiscal year, I feel very reluctant to approve a budget that looks like we're going to break even and put no further money into it. So that's my point.
All right. Carl, go ahead.
Okay. This is, I think, the second consecutive Finance Committee meeting that I'm agreeing with Jim Watts, and I know that's a shock to a lot of people. But I kind of agree with what he says. I do agree with what he says. And my issue is, this is not a great budget, but I also think that I cannot sit here and vote against it or abstain, because I don't believe in that, because somehow I got appointed to make a decision. What I'm asking is for the board members who are listening now, for our general manager and for our chief of police to make every effort to keep the legal fees low, because besides staff-related issues, that's the biggest expense we have. and we make almost no effort to control it, it could easily be out of budget by 100,000, 150,000. So I'm expecting the four of you who are listening to me to make a major effort to reduce or to keep the legal fees down. And for our police chief, that means that he works on training his staff so we don't do stupid things. Because
Carl, let's not veer into policy, please. I appreciate your point of view, but let's keep that for the board meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
You don't listen to me at the board meeting. But
I listen to you, always listen to you, always listen to you.
Yeah, sure.
You're my favorite speaker. But I think we hear you.
Okay, good.
I did have another request. I think that the idea of a narrative or an explanation about splitting the accounts out and what the differences are, really good to have that written down in a presentation for the next board meeting. So one, Catherine, you don't need to go through the 10-15-minute explanation. It'll just be in front of everybody. Bill?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on what the committee member Watt indicated about really, as part of the budget, understanding what the projected beginning balance and ending balance is on a fund basis. And I do think that's an integral part of the budget and something that we can work on as well. I do think that's important.
I also want to just let you guys all know that the audit is just being completed. So we finally just got a draft back. So that was totally out of my control. You know, I had nothing to do with the audit.
Don't realize that.
So, I mean, there were just a few items that I had to provide to them, but for the most part, I just had to wait. So in order to have really solid numbers, I need to know where we ended, you know, at the end of last year, which even the December, you know, so for now, I do have a number for where we are as of, you know, May 31st, and I can just read the numbers to you guys so you know. Our general fund is at 217,000. These are just our two fund balances that we mostly work out of. You know, we have a bunch of other smaller accounts and accounts on the balance sheet, but the general fund's 217,000, and the LAIF account is 1.855658 million. And then the expenses we expect in June is about 239,000 for expenses. And then if the community center closes out in June, that's 184,000. So that leaves us at June 31st with 1.649 million. So that also, I believe, is not completely reconciled yet, but those are the kind of preliminary numbers for those accounts. And once the audit's done, you know, I can verify that and let you guys all know.
Where's the reimbursement money?
What?
Where is the reimbursement money? Don't we have $100,000 coming once the building is completed?
We do. That will come, they said 3 to 4 months after we submit the grant money for that. And I think that's 154,000.
Okay.
56. And you know that I did leave that out of this community center renovation budget status report. I have to include that in there.
So you've got the draft audit. What's the next step? That you and Bill look it over and then either approve or disapprove, and then it's final?
Correct. Right now, actually, Debbie Russell is, you know, she had agreed to, at her old rate, she had agreed to complete the audit with Tony. So she's reviewing it right now, and I'm hoping she's going to give us her comments on it. And I've also been reviewing it, but I haven't been through an audit before, and she's been doing this for 20 years. So there are oddities to, you know, our accounting. It's, you know, and it's working with the county. And so hopefully that will be done within the next week or two here.
Okay. Great. You did have something on here about the community center financial update. You just want to go through that quickly?
Yes, sure. if everyone's looking at that spreadsheet, there were two different spreadsheets. There's the one that I did, that's the Community Center Renovation Budget Status Report. And then there's the one from, the detail is from the architect, or from KCK, I'm sorry, from Glass and Associates, the page in the back. And that's basically all the change orders. So all of my numbers for change orders come from here, and it also gives, their sheet gives a list of all their application for payment and the totals for that. So basically from the outside, initial outside contracts, and this is all from Bill Zanoni's reports that he's given in the past. The 2011 to 2019, the 125,035.24, and the 120,753. And the only reason I split those up was because I needed to see what we've paid Glass so far, because I was comparing that to their total contract that we had with them. So those are the initial costs, and then the original sum with KCK is 1.669,400. So if you just follow down all the different applications, the only one that we haven't paid is the $186,083. But then we are getting a credit for the contingency, the 54,662. So it's the balance due to KCK once they bill us. I don't know if they're going to bill us in two payments or one, but the balance due to them is $131,421. And then Glass and Associates, we will owe them $7,146. And I believe that there's a $3,500 payment that needs to be approved by the board in there because it was an increase. The Thomas Swain contract for signage, I believe that half of that has been paid as a retainer. I have to check on that though, but I believe half of that was paid. The AV equipment is an outside of this contract, and that's $19,480. Window coverings, I took that $14,000 from the $13,939 that they took, the Glass and Associates took that out of our budget and gave us a credit for it because they're not doing that work. So I actually don't know if $14,000 will be enough, but that was from what they took out. They took out the $13,939. So I just put in a $14,000 line item for that. And then I just gave a buffer of $10,000 for other things that I don't know about. So I'm thinking that there's a total of about $184,456 to close the project of cash that we will have to, disperse. So, so that 184,456 is coming off the top of what I think our cash projection will be at the end of June. This also, the total cost of the project is the 1.88 million. And then we will get reimbursed for the grant in there. So I will add the grant to this and repost this on the website. And I believe the grant is 156,000. The total cost of the project did take off the 75,000 for the Eagle Builders settlement that was at the beginning of the project. And I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
Will we have a final once the building is completed?
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, did you? Right.
There we
Go
go.
ahead.
I'm sorry, Catherine, could you repeat for me the window coverings, the 14,000, you're adding that we need to pay that to them?
Well, so from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I wasn't in on all of this, but I understood that they're not doing a certain amount of work for window coverings. They only did partially. They did some things, but they didn't do others. So there's still going to be work that has to be done. So they took out under their contingency, if you see that contingency used to date, and if you go onto their little spreadsheet, it says delete shades, provide shade at meeting, provide roll down shades at Nanowall, and they deleted 13,939 from theirs. So I was adding that back in to what we potentially will have to pay out, because I assumed that work would still need to get done.
No.
That doesn't. Okay.
So what we did with the architect, the shades for the clear story windows were budgeted for, but those have been removed from the project as not necessary. And the shades have all been installed that will be in the building. So we should be able to, remove that 14,000 as an expense. It saved us a lot of funds. So
okay, yeah, that's great. Okay, I will take that out. Do you think that the 10,000 is too much? The estimated miscellaneous, I didn't know if there's going to be anything additional. I'm sorry, your sound's not working anymore, Rochelle.
Oh, wait, I'm gonna see if I can get her going. Wait a second. There you go. There she is.
thank you. I think that will be probably fine. There might be a few things that we're looking at doing, like something with the planter boxes that we may want to use under the contingency, but I think that will be just fine to leave it in for now, and we'll see when we close out here in the next few weeks if there's anything else.
And one last thing do you know if we will be making a payment before the end of the year to finalize like the construction payment?
I would assume so. They want to be done and completely finished up by June 15th. So we hope that will then, whether or not, how we can make the space available is a bill question, and in terms of health and safety. And so, but I think we should be making a payment. Whether that will come in time for you in terms of processing. But yes, I think we can close it out before the end of the month.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions here? No? Then I think we can entertain motions. Do we have any motions?
Are there any participants that need to do anything?
Well, we already had the public comment section before we discussed things.
I guess my question is, do the committee members want a motion, and when are we intending that we have another meeting?
Well, my assumption is that the next step would be the budget in some form either goes to the board or it doesn't. I'm assuming it goes to the board. Bill, you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I think what my suggestion and what we would want to do as staff, having participated, listening to the comments, is that if we can compile a list of the comments and concerns and basically include that in an agenda report to the board when the board receives the budget. And then, for example, we can mention the concern about the lack of any dollars for the public safety building or whatever the options might be, making sure that the board understands what the fund balance is, and so forth, and have that be part of the agenda report in terms of the comments that have been made. And then the idea is that the full board would have the benefit of the finance committee's discussion and again, suggestions, concerns for the board to consider. And so whether that's in the form of a motion or
that could just be direction to staff, really.
It really, yeah, I would consider that direction to staff and make sure that, and we would make sure that we have covered the various topics when we provide that report to the board.
Well, I'm happy to make a motion that the Finance Committee recommends the consideration of the budget to the board with the following, that Carl Kruger recommends that we examine our legal fees and strongly attempt to keep costs low, that the additional expenses for the annex are added and or temporary housing, that there is a report of cash on hand available for the district, and that the final budget has a narrative form in addition to the numbers provided here.
I'm
There's
willing
any
to second that.
miss? Okay. If there's
Can I-
anything else I missed, please add.
May I add one more
Yes.
to that? I think, well, I have only talked about the fact I think we need to set aside some money to prepare for moving into the annex. What also goes along with that is that we also need to make sure that we have enough available cash reserves to meet the potential costs of relocating our police department into the annex, which could be significant. And from what little I have heard, I couldn't tell from what Katherine was telling us if we have about 1.6 million of available. Is that what Katherine was saying? I think we need to have about $1 million to redo that building and to move the police department. And I think we're far short of that. And we need to start putting
We need a balance sheet.
Pardon?
It proves that we need a balance sheet, an up-to-date balance sheet.
Fine.
Yeah.
But then we also need to agree that as part of that balance sheet, we need to have set aside sufficient reserves to do what I was talking about. Not just to do the $100,000 for this year, but then probably next year doing the whole 9 yards, which is going to be actually redoing the building and relocating the police department, which is going to be very costly.
Well, how about we amend Rochelle's motion to have the board consider creating some reserves?
Agreed.
Okay.
To meet those costs. Yeah.
All right. Do I have a second?
I agree.
You still second?
Yes.
Okay. We'll take a vote. Mike? Wait a second.
Oh, wait, I think you have to have public comment on the motion. Do we have to allow for that?
No, public comment goes before all this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you're left on me. Is that where we are still?
You're voting on the motion.
I'll agree. I'll agree to the motion.
Okay, Rochelle?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Jim?
No.
I'll vote yes. So that's 4-1. Motion passes. So Bill and Katherine, we can work with you getting this ready for the board.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And the final item is scheduling the next meeting. So certainly we won't have a next meeting before the next board meeting. Bill, what is your feeling, or Katherine, about when we would need to meet again?
We haven't really discussed it actually, if we needed another meeting this month. Not any agenda items that come to mind right now anyway.
We have to look at the audit. Is that
Yeah.
correct? That this committee has to look at the audit?
So it goes to the finance committee first and then it goes to the board? Is that the normal? Yeah, okay.
Michelle, when will the community center be ready?
Well, I mean, we hope it's really ready. I mean, but they hope to be completely out of it by mid-June. But then, as I was saying, Carl, it just, when we can let people in is a different question, and how we can let people in. You know, I would love to have kicked it off with a big opening in May or April or May, which we almost could have done, but
I was
you know.
thinking more in terms of having the next meeting there.
In the community center?
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't think that's going to happen.
it's an issue of safe gathering, I'm afraid.
It's not going to happen.
It's not an issue of the building, which
Yeah.
I understand, and I have walked through it, and it has a certificate of occupancy. If it weren't for the shelter in place and public gathering constraints, I think you could have a meeting there, but as long as those are in place, it's just not likely.
We are not going to have a dozen people, and we can make sure we have proper distances.
I don't think it's going to happen. So that's just not even.
It would be lovely. I would. You can't believe how much I want to share it with everyone. But you know, we had almost 20 people today. What you know, I'm going to be looking. Director Hasai and myself, we're going to try and figure out how in the next month or two we can get folks to look at the space and to at least to see the space and appreciate the work that you've all done to get us there, and the park committee is done and the KCC is done to get us there in a safe way. So I would love to have you all in there today, but I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
I would much prefer it to this, but I just, we have to be realistic. Why don't we just hold off on scheduling the next meeting until we know when the audit is complete, and then we can schedule one for that.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, could I just make one other comment?
Sure.
I just real briefly, because I could say more, but I wanted to thank Katherine for all the work she did in putting the budget together. This was not an easy task, and especially because we talked about making a lot of changes and trying to move things along as Committee Member Sheriff Watt indicated about doing some reorganizing, and so it was a lot of work. She put in a lot of time, and I think just really outstanding quality work. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Katherine.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So does that make sense about just waiting to schedule until we know when the audit is complete?
I think that makes sense, yeah. If I know that I'm not looking at a calendar now, but we had talked about perhaps having the first Tuesday of each month tentatively reserved by the Finance Committee, and so we have something to target for. I don't know when the July 4th holiday falls. Is again not looking at the calendar, but my sense is that it might be around then if we could get that scheduled and get the audit done.
It'll be the 7th. July 7th be the first Tuesday in July.
We could at least tentatively get that on people's calendar, Mr. Chair, if that makes sense.
Let me see. July 4th, July 7th. It's Ringo Starr's birthday, sure.
I think
I knew that.
Okay. All right, why don't we tentatively plan on July 7th, pending having the audit complete. Is that okay for everybody?
Since I was the last one to come in, may I be the first one to go?
I don't have much control over that, Carol. All right, so tentatively July 7th, the next meeting, we can look at the audit and I guess anything else that comes up. And members of the public, again, I had a public comment period. If you missed it, this is just going before the board, so I would encourage you to come before the board and discuss, and there'll be a little more information and it'll be more complete. Of course, you're welcome to email us if you have any comments, but hopefully we'll see you at the board meeting. Unless
Thank
anybody
you
else.
very much.
What?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. All right. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.